So one of the things, my job was to try to teach Korean language. I learned Korean, and to try to teach something about Korean culture and some of the great achievements in the culture. And you start to realize, I mean, that kind of exposure to those concepts made me realize that you could try to make a change. But we are in a business, and you have to entertain an audience, and you have to, but you can do it responsibly, I think, and that's a challenge if you can actually make it work and achieve a great piece of entertainment and still have values. And I think good films do that.
Yeah, and you're certainly right about film having the power to change minds, to change perceptions. It's really become the new universal language. I read somewhere that before the great Attenborough film Gandhi, about 18% of Americans had ever heard of Mahatma Gandhi. And after the film, I mean, he's now selling Apple computers. So, one film managed to put not just a man, but a set of ideas so deeply into the cultural sphere that everybody in this room can tell you who Gandhi is and what Gandhi stood for, not because they read a book about Gandhi, not because they saw, a documentary about Gandhi, but because of this film. And this goes back a little bit actually to what you were saying earlier, Mark, about, this notion that, well, yes, I mean, you do have this responsibility. You have a certain amount of power because of the position that you are. But, ultimately the creative process involves many people. And part of the problem, I think, and I'd love to hear your perspective of this, is that there aren't that many people from the Middle East. There aren't a lot of Mark Amins who are studio heads or producers, or for that matter, even directors and writers. So the two questions I have is, one, do you see a change in that? I mean, you're in a place where you're seeing a lot of young talent coming up. Are you seeing more brown faces, if you will? And two, do you feel like there's any way to have that kind of shift in perception without it coming from the people from the region?
Well, the answer is yes, definitely. You see the first generation new immigrants, coming up. I see them among writers, directors, agents, cinematographers, more so than ever. Still, very, very tiny proportion of so-called Hollywood, but there's definitely more. They're not big enough percentage to really make a difference in that sense. And again, like the rest of us, their first preoccupation is just hanging in there and making is just fighting this. The everyday battle is like the fighting for survival every day, and it's getting tougher and tougher, the economics of Hollywood. So yes, there's more of them, but definitely not enough for them to be a significant agent of change. On the other hand, I really believe, and there's this group, MOST, which is, I think we were part of before, which has been formed, and I'm trying to help wherever I can to actually.
This is Muslims on Screen and
Muslims,
television.
yes, and they are actually systematically approaching all the studios, the agencies, and saying, look, if you have a script, if you have a project that involves Muslims or Middle Easterns, let us read it, let us provide you research. Again, not censorship, is more volunteering. And I'm trying to help them, but I'm not active, I cannot take credit for anything. But what I can see is that, and what I've heard, is that the reaction actually is very, very encouraging. So I think the answer, at least in our lifetime, is not going to come from a big percentage of Hollywood becoming Muslim or brown. I think it's going to come more from groups like this, activist groups, who are going to approach the studios, the agencies, the writers, or whatever, or try to identify a project that has a character or an issue and make sure it's addressed honestly. So the good news is that there are groups like that, and also the second good news is that so far from what I've seen and heard, they really haven't had any problem. It's been very receptive. And I think the other thing is, as we've seen with any minority in this country, as they say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Yeah. The studios have a track record of actually having gone back and changing movies that were already made. One example, some people might remember Aladdin. The first version actually came out in theaters, and I saw that, and when I saw that, I cringed. This first opening song of the Aladdin, he's talking about his homeland. I don't remember the actual song, but I remember a portion of this. It's dry and it's beautiful mountain. Even though it's barbaric, I love it. And it was like so. And there was enough, and at that time I had nothing to do with it. I just watched the process unfold, and I saw protest from I think Arab American activist groups, to the point where Disney actually went and changed the song. So by the time the movie came out on DVD, it's been changed. So, and it's basically this, I think the message here is that we really need to, rely more on being proactive and activist groups, and to really kind of watch it and try to identify if there is something like that and try to affect it. And it's going to be a long time before we can count on the number of Muslims in the film business to have any kind of impact. Again, on the other, by the way, I read the script at some point in the stage of Alchemist. I'd read the book and I read the script, and I think I met with Larry Lawrence Fishburne on that project while we were trying to figure out a way. But so, and I didn't think of it. That is a really good example of a project that
went through many iterations, and it was over script that we had a disagreement. But there was a version of that I thought was quite good.
Yeah, but I'm not sure which version I read. I like to get your favorite version. So
always networking, making deals. I think the line that you were thinking of in Aladdin is when the Robin Williams character as Genie, some line about stoning women and chopping off heads, and you're right, it was changed. But of course, that's Disney, which is, having worked with Disney, they are so afraid of offending anyone that they'll do things like that. But Howard, when you're dealing with a serial that's about terrorism, that's about global security, these kinds of issues, I would imagine that sometimes it gets a little bit annoying to have a group like MOST or MPAC parsing every little thing that's going on.
Well, they approached us actually really diplomatically. It wasn't like they weren't hitting us over the head, and they weren't protesting. They said, "Can we sit down and talk?" And it was really, again, that any reasonable and fair-minded person is going to hear that and is going to respond. We had a big billboard on the 405 in season 2, and it was a Muslim family, a Muslim American family, and the title was "They Could Be Next Door." Now, I didn't approve that campaign. I had no idea this was actually out there, but when they said, imagine when we drove by from, up to LA and seeing this thing, particularly in 2002. So that was a bit of an eye-opener. And of course, you can't be, look, there's always a line between censorship and between propaganda and between, ultimately, you're serving an audience, you're serving yourself as a writer, as a producer, you have to tell a good story. But you have to also understand that what the story you're telling has an impact.